Israel, welcome to Tel Megiddo. I guess you've been here before.
Right, wonderful to be here. Thanks, Matt, and welcome you too.
Thanks.
I remember the day that you came for the first time in 1998. You were a student,
gosh.
and since then, we had a long and very fruitful way together.
Yeah, it's almost 25 years.
Absolutely.
It's crazy to think about. We're here in the Jezreel Valley, which is, of course, a very important place for archaeology in general. But more specifically, we're at the foot of Tel Megiddo, one of the most important archaeological sites in the region. Geographically speaking, we're, of course, just next to the Manasseh Hills on the west side of the valley, at a very strategic point where we have the intersection of roads, we have access to water, and that probably says something about the importance of the site.
Sure. So first of all, we need to say a few words about, the identification of the site. How do we know that we are sitting here at Megiddo? Because in many places in the land of Israel, the names in Arabic preserve the old name from, either Bible or other historical texts.
Right.
At Tel Megiddo, this is not the case. The site is called in Arabic Tel al-Mutasallem, which means the Tel of the governor.
Okay.
And it makes sense because it is an important place. However, we know that this must be Megiddo because of the game in the entire valley. When you think about Megiddo, when you're going into the details of the references in historical records, in fact, and compare to other sites and consider the major tales in the valley, there's no other way but to identify Megiddo with the Tel al-Mutasallem, and this is indeed the identification which has been accepted from the beginning of research. And Megiddo is important not only because it sits on plenty of water and the fertile valley, it is also located on the international road, which comes from Egypt, crosses the hills behind us and goes into the valley. So the place is located in a not only strategic but very sensitive spot along the road, and from here you can take either a turn to the left, go to the north to Phoenicia, or cross the valley, go to Damascus, go to Mesopotamia, go to Anatolia. So we are on the main highway of the ancient Near East. And indeed, because of the combination of all these factors, Megiddo is mentioned in all great records of the ancient Near East. Tell us a little bit about it.
Sure, that's right. We start to see Megiddo appearing already in Egyptian records, in particular the famous Battle of Megiddo, which is really an amazing text. Tutmosis III, Pharaoh of the New Kingdom, he tells us in great detail about his campaign to conquer Megiddo. It goes through a lot of detail about the geography of the site, what he did when he got here, how he had to lay siege to the city itself and for how long. And of course, he's victorious and is able to take all sorts of booty back to Egypt and make these offerings to the god Amun, which is, of course, why he's writing these texts. He's bragging to the god that he's done his job. But also, we get a lot of other Egyptian texts from not too long later. In the Amarna letters in Egypt, the diplomatic correspondence between the kings of the city-states here and their pharaonic overlords in Egypt, we must have several letters from the king of Megiddo to his pharaonic overlord and vice versa. In fact, from these letters, we learn quite a bit about how Egyptian rule functioned, and we even learn the name of one of the kings. His name is Biridia. In fact, we'll have an opportunity to talk about him in a little more detail.
We'll get back to Biridia, exactly. More than once, I think.
That's right. We also have Hittite texts. I think we have one, is that right?
One, yes, exactly. And then we have, of course, the Assyrian records.
Right, the Assyrian records referring to Megiddo. The Assyrians, of course, conquering
Megiddo. Center
Megiddo.
of a province of Megiddo. And then, of course, the Bible. There's a lot in the Bible. Megiddo is, for a place located away from Jerusalem. I mean, there's no wonder that places near Jerusalem are mentioned many times, like Bethel and other sites. However, for a place which is located away from Jerusalem and the immediate vicinity of Judah, this place is mentioned many times in the Bible in regard of several very important figures, such as, King Solomon and King Josiah and others. We will have the chance to discuss each and every one of them. So altogether, we have really the full record. I think, Matt, that this is the only place in the region, I suppose the only place is at least in the Levant, which is mentioned in all the great records, extra biblical of the Bronze and Iron Ages, and in the Bible.
Yeah, that's right. I suppose it's no wonder then, with all these references, that Megiddo's enjoyed excavation for some 120 years, almost
I
continuously.
suppose the most excavated site here in this land.
Yeah, that's right. So who was the first to come here?
The first was the German excavator Gottlieb Schumacher. He was a very interesting fellow. He was born in the United States to a German Templar family. He was part of the Templar community then in Palestine of the late 19th century and beginning of the 20th century. They lived in Haifa. The Schumacher house is known in the lower city of Haifa. And he excavated here between 1903 and 1905, and we know exactly the date when he started. Now, archaeology then was at its infancy. However, Schumacher was a good engineer and an architect, so he knew exactly what he was doing regarding understanding the architecture at least, and also a little bit about stratigraphy. He divided his finds into 8 main layers, and in fact, he gave us some sort of a good beginning for the exploration of Megiddo. The finds of the Schumacher excavations are in Berlin, the Vorderasiatische Museum. So whoever goes to Berlin can see the finds there in the basement. And this was the beginning. The next main excavation is already a very different story. The amazing undertaking of the University of Chicago in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, the story of the Chicago excavations is amazing in itself. I mean, it was funded by Rockefeller after all. They had lots of money, lots of support for the United States. I think, if I remember correctly, one of the first paved roads in Palestine was paid for by Rockefeller from Haifa to the Tel of Megiddo, just so Rockefeller could visit.
And they constructed the houses of the expedition.
There's a mansion here for their excavation house. But that's great. But their work has been hugely influential on the development of archaeology in this region. They excavated so much of the Tel that the complete chronology of the site is fairly well known from their excavations in all of the different periods. So it has already given us a base, this Chicago excavations, for understanding all of the southern Levant. William Foxwell Albright, for example, would visit the excavations here while Chicago was digging, and he was thrilled to be able to see all of the pottery and material culture coming out in all of these different layers. And Megiddo, in his mind, as well as everyone else's later on, formed the basis for all of the terminology we use today: early bronze, middle bronze, late bronze, Iron Age, and so on. So the Chicago excavations certainly had that legacy. They also excavated quite a number of major monuments here at the site. Megiddo has a lot of monuments, so they couldn't miss them, but many of them are still standing today and form the basis for any visit to Tel Megiddo. And I think our own discussion over these next few episodes is really going to focus on a lot of these monuments.
Absolutely, yes. So this was the University of Chicago. I'm always amazed when I go up the site after so many years that I'm here, and I'm looking around and I'm telling myself, what's going on here? They managed to take slices out of the Tel. Well, first they peeled off some of the layers, and then they took slices. And when I go up and I look at it, I'm saying to myself, how long it would take us, Matt, you and me, to do the same? And I say to myself, probably 1,000 years.
I think that's my calculation as well.
something like that. So this is amazing.
Well, I think despite as much as they've excavated, I mean, as we'll see, giant pieces of cake out of the Tel, there's always still something new to find here. Sure. When Yadin was here, he found all new monuments that Chicago didn't even know about.
Yeah, sure. And I think that we need to say, first of all, to give compliments to our predecessors, which means Schumacher was a good excavator for his time. The University of Chicago came here with great scholars, researchers. They knew what they were doing for their time in the 20s and 30s. And then came Yigdal Yadin. Yigdal Yadin, the celebrated Israeli archaeologist, from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He came here after excavating Hatzor, and he had questions in order to try to understand the Iron Age, questions of how to make the correlation between Hatzor and Megiddo. And he was the one who developed the idea, another idea, I would say, of Solomonic, especially Megiddo. So the spotlight was on the Iron Age, the spotlight was on the traditional biblical archaeology of the days of Solomon, and Yadin was a very brilliant man. When I came to study archaeology here in Israel, and Yadin's theories about Hatzor and Megiddo and Gezer correlated with the famous biblical passage in the first book of Kings, chapter 9. This was the foundation for the archaeology of the Iron Age, and he was active here. I mean, it was a fascinating work. He uncovered some of the monuments, as you said, and this was really a very important step in the exploration of Megiddo.
Right, so with his work and Chicago's work and Schumacher's work, what were you thinking when you started a new project at Megiddo in the 1990s?
That's a very good question, my dear Matt, because I knew exactly what I was doing and what I was coming for. But now when I reflect back 28 years, 40, not every year, every second year, 14 seasons at Megiddo, because I'm doing other things, 1 zillion other things in the same time. But the idea was very pretentious. The idea was Megiddo is the centerpiece of the archaeology of this land for the Bronze and Iron Ages, and we'll hear in a minute beyond this land, for the entire part of the world here. So we need to use modern methods in order to put some order in the stratigraphy and chronology. I mean, there was order, but to recheck the stratigraphy and chronology, as I mentioned, with new methods, because every single problem in the history and in the archaeology of the land of Israel in the Bronze and Iron Ages started here at Megiddo. It was like the switchboard of all problems here in one small place, in the Jezreel Valley. So my idea was the following. First of all, to recheck the entire stratigraphy of the site, and I could even dream about it because we could do the rechecking in different places because the belly, so to speak, of the mound had already been opened for us by the University of Chicago. So we could do section by section the entire sequence, right? And then to deal with chronology. So this was the first. The second one was, and I did this in the beginning with my friend and colleague, David Yosishkin, who was here with me. He was the co-director for the first part of the excavations until 10 or 12 years ago. And so rechecking the entire stratigraphy. Secondly, the idea was to recheck monuments. There were wonderful monuments that were excavated by Chicago. The idea was to recheck them and find out about their date and so on. And then also to make Megiddo a laboratory for new methods and techniques in archaeology. Megiddo, in fact, has always been the laboratory. Even for the time of Schumacher and even for the time of the University of Chicago, you may remember, Matt, that they flew their balloon, First aerial photography of archaeology was undertaken here at Megiddo. So we also decided to come with our own methods and more slowly into the exact and life sciences and their support of archaeology. We will speak in this series quite a lot about this. So these were the main targets of the excavations. When I think about it now, I say to myself, were you crazy? How dared you to ask such big questions and even dream that you'll be able to fulfill them? How dare you in 1994 to do this? And here we are sitting here in 2022 and we are almost there.
Yeah, I guess you had some chutzpah.
I had some chutzpah. Okay, mate, so many excavations.
Yeah, Megiddo is really a unique site. I mean, look behind us. You're looking at a city gate from the late Bronze Age. No, you're looking at 12 city gates from the Middle Bronze, Late Bronze, Iron Age. We have everything. We have huge monuments stacked on top of one another. The entire history of the Tel is wide open and exposed to us. There are some 30 major layers here, stretching from the early Bronze Age to through the Persian period. And this is really a unique site with unique opportunities.
A unique laboratory.
That's right.
This year I became a little bit more blunt in my approach
I noticed.
of how to present Megiddo vis-a-vis other sites. So I think when I say unique, I don't mean unique in the valley, and I don't mean unique in Israel, and I don't even mean unique in the Levant. This is a unique site in the ancient world. In the entire region that I know very well, I know, Eastern Mediterranean, from Greece and Cyprus and Turkey, into the delta of Egypt, into these countries, Israel and the neighboring regions, the Levant, Syria, and Iraq in a way also, all the way to, to Iran also. There's no site like this with a full record of the Bronze and Iron Ages. Now you can take me, my dear Matt, and put me, in some heck place in Syria and tell me, well, here is a pile of earth, a tell, everything is there. Okay, fine, fair enough, let's start excavating. Here, there's a tell with the full coverage, with the full sequence, excavated. Now, we have, the two of us, a very special way of treating the sequence at Megiddo, which makes it even more important in the entire ancient world. What I'm going to tell you now, and to tell the camera, of course, sounds straightforward, but it does not. We are working on first of all, establishing firm stratigraphy. We need to know for a certain layer the walls and the floors and what connects to what and so on, and what's below and what's above. Then we deal with the cultural assemblages, especially the ceramic assemblage on each floor, on each layer, which provides us with relative chronology. What comes first and what comes later. And then at Megiddo here, we have something really unique, which is a merciless bombardment of radiocarbon, seeking for radiocarbon samples. There's no bombardment. We are taking samples, organic samples for radiocarbon, carbon-14 dating. So right now, at the end of this season, we are in a situation that the entire sequence of Megiddo is radiocarbon dated. There is no site like this, definitely not in the ancient world, and I think not in the world. And the number of radiocarbon samples is amazing. And this is why Megiddo now is the ladder according to which everybody else must line up, which means this is it. We can provide scholars, all sorts of scholars, doing this, doing that, we'll speak about it later, with absolute dates, real dates, for every layer, for every sample. And if there are places in Syria, or if there are places, let's say, in the Greek world, in the Greek world, they don't have chronology of themselves. They don't have Egyptian finds like we have. They don't have, other sources, and they don't do as much as radiocarbon testing as we do. So they also can line up with us according to Greek finds that are found in well-dated layers at Megiddo here. So Megiddo is really now a centerpiece for the entire ancient world.
Okay, let's take our viewers on a tour of all of these different layers.
Absolutely, with great pleasure.